Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 20th of November 2019, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish. Allegedly, Mike, there's an election running.
Well, apparently.
The slowest, most boring election in the country's history, possibly.
Yes, but nonetheless, there were all kinds of programmes on TV last night. This is the ITV election debate between Boris and Corbyn, but the BBC had Nigel Farage on. We'll be coming on to that in a second. ITV had other stuff going on as well. Really the theme, aside from the boring aspect of this, the theme of it is all about the destruction of the country. The question that Jeremy Corbyn was asked, or they were both asked, was, is the monarchy fit for purpose? Jeremy Corbyn's response was this: it needs a bit of improvement. Boris, of course, said, well, the monarchy is a key part of our situation, and really the monarchy itself is can't be criticised. But nonetheless, then Corbyn was asked, is Prince Andrew fit for purpose? And he said, before we talk about Prince Andrew, we should consider the victims. But then he, perhaps unfortunately, decided that the best way to pronounce Jeffrey Epstein's name was Jeffrey Epstein. And as a result, Corbyn has now come under a massive attack this morning. It has reinvigorated the anti-Semitism narrative because of the way he pronounced Epstein's name. It may well turn out badly for him in that sense.
Incredible, though, Mike, that the Mail admitted in a major article where it's now looking at Prince Andrew's finances, tie this together. They're looking at his finances and saying, well, he gets £250,000 allowance from Mummy, from the Queen. And he's got a pension of £20,000 from his time in the Royal Navy. A lot of other money coming in, a lot of other money. They're now looking at it. But the Mail casually said, well, we've known about all this since 2016. So we've got the Epstein thing in the background. We've got all the stuff to do with the money and Andy's dirty business dealings, but the time it's released is in the middle of this election.
Right.
It's just fascinating, isn't it? And then just to tie that in with Jeremy Corbyn, why would he pronounce that name differently? Why would you do that? Is that the correct pronunciation?
Well, it's interesting because I said Epstein, you said Epstein, he said Epstein.
Okay.
Right. So I'm not certain that anybody actually knows what the correct way to pronounce it is.
I haven't heard anybody to date, in all the heavy criticism of Epstein, even mentioning that he's Jewish. I don't even know that he is. So
I think he is.
Why the backlash?
I think he was. So and that's yes. Well, exactly. So this is the point. Now, of course, it's always tricky because we have criticised the royal family in recent months and years for connections to Jimmy Savile, for
Oxford and Cherwell Valley College, for me personally, Mike, because Prince Andrew's PA was told what was happening in that college and it was all ignored, and as a result he actually met the press in the very workshop where abuses had taken place.
Absolutely. And of course Charles Houston and others. So there are questions to be asked with respect to the royal family. Your question is, why is this being brought up in the middle of an election campaign? And what I'm going to say is that while we are not for 1 second forgiving Prince Andrew or anything that any of the royals have done over the past decades, the fact is that the timing is interesting, and it's beginning to look like we're heading towards a complete restructuring of the country.
The country, is absolutely being attacked from the inside, and all the pillars of this country are being pulled apart, pulled down, I think is what's going on.
Absolutely. So one of the other people that was being interviewed was Nigel Farage. He was on the BBC. Now this apparently was actually recorded on Monday. It was broadcast last night. So we might say that it was edited, and we don't know whether there was anything removed. However, his key points were this: he wants to see, and the Brexit Party is standing for, apparently, abolition of the House of Lords. He wants to see a change in the voting system, so he wants proportional representation. This one I do agree with, scrap the current postal voting register, fair enough. But then he went on to say he wants to see a citizens' initiative, where basically if Parliament isn't doing what the country thinks or what people think is the right thing, then really we should be able to get people together, get a referendum organised. This is looking a bit like sortition. It's looking a bit like the Citizens' Assembly's idea that the Extinction Rebellion is pushing through at the moment. And finally, he said we've got to throw away 1,500 years of tradition, 1,500 years of the best constitution on the planet, really, and replace that with a written constitution, because it's the only way that us stupid people can really understand how everything works.
This man is so dangerous. I've stayed consistent on my analysis of this man over a great many years, and we now see what he is. He's now back in the middle of politics. He was going to run away from politics, then he got involved with Trump. Now he's in the middle of it, and he's exerting control over what's happening in this election, and he is now absolutely attacking the heart, the constitution of this country. So the moment you say you want a written constitution, what you're actually saying is, oh well, we don't have one at the moment, and therefore everything and anything goes under that statement.
Well, what's quite interesting, if you look at that list, we're looking at a picture building there, which is rather European in structure. So we get rid of the House of Lords. Now, his excuse for needing a written constitution was because Tony Blair had established the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, in his view, was something unproductive, not very good. It clearly gave the wrong answer to one or two recent court cases, but nonetheless, the point is, and the point that Nigel Farage did not highlight here, was that the creation of the Supreme Court was an act of constitutional vandalism. And it was a step along the road of constitutional reform that some of these European-style, pro-European-style reformers want to see. And he seems to have jumped on the same bandwagon. It's incredible.
But not if you say that Nigel Farage's job from the outset was to wave the flag, to get all the people out the woodwork who were going to stand up against the EU. He was then going to lead them into the corral. It backfired that too many voted for the referendum. And then what did he have to do? He had to work to help destroy UKIP as a party. And then he gets back into politics, trying to exert control through the Brexit party. But just remind people, I think we have mentioned it before, but if you have not visited the website badboysofbrexit.com, we suggest you do. A lot of very good information on that website, put there by a Labour MP. Badboysofbrexit.com gives you a bit of background to who these people really are. Well, something else strange going on, and a big thank you to one of our viewers that pointed this out to us this morning. But we've got the Committee on Standards in Public Life putting out a letter to parties on the subject of intimidation in public life, letter to political parties on election pledge. Only what is special about this is it's a joint letter from the committee and the Joe Cox Foundation. And my immediate thought, Mike, was that we've got a charity now working alongside a public body. So this is participatory democracy in action, where charities hold more sway than the voter themselves.
Yeah, and you could also call it fusion doctrine.
You could also call it fusion doctrine. So just remind people, here is the Committee on Standards in Public Life. So who's involved? Well, we've got a Lord Jonathan Evans, we've got Dame Margaret Beckett, Dame Shirley Pearce, Jane Ramsey, Lord Andrew Stenell, Dr. Jane Martin and Manisha Shah. Don't know a lot about these people, only I'm fascinated in what they're getting up to here. What they're supposed to be doing is advising the Prime Minister on ethical standards across the whole of public life in England. It monitors and reports on issues relating to the standards of conduct of all public office holders. And it goes on to say it's an advisory non-departmental public body. So this will be right alongside the Cabinet Office.
Well, that's what it says, sponsored by the Cabinet Office.
Absolutely, right alongside the Cabinet Office, and therefore we could say probably deeply controlled by the Cabinet Office, although they would say they were independent. But it's advisory. Its job is to advise. Well, this is the letter that they pushed out. And what's it got to say? It says, we're writing to you at the time of this general election to update you on our ongoing work with all political parties in Westminster on the joint standard of conduct, one of the key recommendations of the Intimidation in Public Life report published in December 2017. So this is going out to all candidates. It's got a second page to it, which is here. What are they talking about? Well, you've got to take responsibility for setting an appropriate tone when campaigning. You've got to lead by example to encourage and foster constructive democratic debate and tolerance of other points of view. You've got to promote and defend the dignity of others, including political opponents, treating all with courtesy and respect. And then, of course, we see that at the end, it's got a big signature by the charity, Jackie Smith, the Joe Cox Foundation. And then underneath that has got Jonathan Evans, Lord Evans of Waresdale, the Committee on Standards in Public Life. So if you take a simplistic look at this, Mike, they are telling candidates what they need to do.
Well, they're telling candidates how to act, what to say.
And wouldn't you call that campaigning?
Well, what I would say is that it's utterly undemocratic. I mean, if a candidate wants to make a statement which some people find difficult to listen to palate, well, that's
the type of person they are, in fact.
Well, the candidate is representing what they are. That person then gets a choice as to whether to vote for them or not. What we have here is a situation where candidates of all political colours are constrained to say particular things, or more importantly, not say other things. It becomes very difficult to differentiate between one candidate or the other under those circumstances.
Because they become bland.
Absolutely.
They become a sort of mush. Well, one of the documents that wasn't attached to this letter, but if you read the letter that I've put up on screen, you'll see it mentions a graphic. I had to actually ask to find that graphic. This is the graphic that was pushed out. Beautiful common purpose colours. Maybe accidental, I don't know. But here it is for those of you that are listening in. This general election, I pledge to 1, set an appropriate tone when campaigning, 2, lead by example to foster constructive democratic debate, 3, promote and defend the dignity of others, including my opponents. So who's to decide what the appropriate tone is? That's the interesting thing. But there in the bottom, we've got the Joe Cox Foundation, and also a hashtag more in common, which I'd like to have a little look at. Now, how did all of this arise? Well, it gets interesting because if you have a look on the committee's government website, you can see these two documents, the review of political parties' codes of conduct, and there's an Annex A. And in these two, you've got more detail as to what's actually happening. So let's bring in a bit of it. It says that the Joe Cox Foundation and the Committee on Standards in Public Life have come together to agree with political parties in Westminster a common approach to tackling intimidation and abuse. Here's the common line being pushed in. It says it builds on the recommendation of the committee's report. But then it says, following meetings held with political parties in November 2018 and March 2019, the output envisaged has evolved into a high-level joint standard around conduct and behaviour. So lots of manoeuvring going on over a lot of long period of time. Was the Joe Cox Foundation funded for this work? Did it involve money? I don't know the answer to that. It's something I think we'd like to find out. But let's follow the story through and have a look at some of the work that was done. Well, this is part of a spreadsheet. It's difficult to show on screen because of the size of the text. But essentially, for the major parties, they've listed out in a spreadsheet what documentation the party has in place and what it's supposed to achieve. So for the Conservatives, the first one here says Code of Conduct for Conservative Party Representative. It's a strict condition of party representatives' ongoing representation of the party, membership of, engagement with, and it says minimum standards of behaviour. So they've done this across the major parties. The second one is Labour, and you'll notice in the headline, the header box to the top right of your screen, that the anti-Semitism word comes in. So very interesting that when you're talking about the language you would use, anti-Semitism strapped in there next to Labour. But unfortunately, I've just cut off the top of this. There was a bit more information, but what intrigued me was essentially this analysis is only really on the main parties. There's also Plaid Cymru added to the right of that, of what you're seeing on screen. But I didn't see UKIP in there, for example. So what it seems to be is that they've gone and discussed with the major parties what their conduct should be, but not particularly interested in anybody else from what we're seeing. So, well, who are the Joe Cox trustees? As always, we went to have a look to see who we were dealing with. It says that the foundation is made up of a small and ambitious team based in London and Yorkshire. And it's always a good start to go and have a look at the people with the power, the trustees. So there's Jackie Smith. So obviously she was a signature on the document we've just seen. We've got Steve Morris, the managing partner of Portland Communications. We'll come back to him. But the one that caught my eye was this lady, Mabel von Oranje. And if you have a look at her, she's a very, very interesting lady with connections into the Dutch royal family. And I'm just fascinated, or I was fascinated, as to why this lady should be heavily involved with the Joe Cox Foundation.
Well, of course, a third of the money that the Joe Cox Foundation had, sorry, you were just going to say this, were you?
It's fine, Mike, you're absolutely in there.
Yes, has gone to the White Helmets via a Dutch organisation.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? So I'm going to say to our viewers and listeners, please research this lady yourself. I'm going to do a little bit to help you on the way. But what is her background and what is her interest in making sure that this election in UK runs smoothly? Well, let's have a look at her. This is where I found her fairly quickly on the World Economic Forum. She's a global advocate for freedom, justice and development, and been doing that for 20 years. She's initiator and chair of Girls Not Brides, the global partnership to end child marriage. She's also here the co-founder and the executive chair of the European Council on Foreign Relations. So I think we can say pretty quickly this lady is a European, an ingrained European, and she's doing a lot of work. She works for the International Criminal Court. That may be helpful with matters to do with the Middle East and white helmets possibly. But also here, she's involved with the Open Society Foundation, so we're into Mr. Soros, and the elders. The elders gave me the creeps. I didn't really get into that, but apparently there are designated global leaders who are called elders.
Absolutely, and if you want to know more about the elders, you need to get onto the UK Column website and read the One World Governance series of articles, because it's all in there.
Well, there we are. The circle is turning nicely, Mike. So here's the European Council on Foreign Relations with a very nice picture. And what do we find in this organisation? Well, we find it's drawing in a lot of people from 50 founding members to over 330 members across Europe. And these are immensely powerful people. And of course, if we have a look at the countries here, you've obviously got the map on the right-hand side of your screen, because these are all the countries right up to the Russian border and include all of the former communist states. So very, very powerful people from those positions. And we'll have a look at those. But this man caught my eye in the documentation, Alexander Stubb. He's Vice President of the European Investment Bank, former Prime Minister of Finland. This is what he had to say. I think you'll like this because you haven't seen it. The European Union has a chance to push for strategic sovereignty like never before, with its nomination of a new set of institutional leaders, among them Ursula von der Leyen from the European Commission President. The EU can protect its interests and promote its values in a geopolitical climate increasingly characterized by competition with the United States and China. ECFR's new series of papers on strategic sovereignty provides an invaluable guide to this power struggle and how, quote, Europeans can win it. If the EU adopts only half of the proposals in this series, it will evolve into a significantly more autonomous world power.
That's the EU, not Germany, France,
Absolutely.
Italy and the Netherlands. That's the EU.
And there's the banking man, the European investment banking man. So one of the powerhouses behind making it happen. You've got to have control of the money. But let's get back to the wider circle of people in this organisation. If we pick up Hungary,
sorry, we're back to the Joe Cox Foundation.
No.
This
This
European Council on Foreign Relations.
Still on the European Council, so I focused on that banker.
Right.
But if we go through and look at the country members of the organisation, of course, under Hungary, we see that we've got Alexander Soros, Deputy Chair of Open Society, and George Soros, absolutely in there. And then if we bring in a bit more, and I'm sorry that the text will be small on your screen for this, but who have we got? Well, I just noticed a couple. We've got Brendan Cox.
This is all a bit incestuous.
A little bit incestuous. So we got Brendan Cox, but he's there as co-founder of More in Common. Do you remember the hashtag
Yes.
on the thing that I
Yes.
showed a few minutes ago? Let's go down. We've got Heather Grab, Executive Director of Open Society Policy Institute. So the circle goes round again then. We come down here, we've got Susan Morgan, freelance consultant, former Senior Programme Officer, Information Programme, Open Society. And down here we've got our old friend Rory Stewart. Now, of course, Rory had delusions of grandeur after he was invited to a Bilderberg meeting. But why was I interested in Rory Stewart? Well, let's come back to the Joe Cox Foundation, and we see that Catherine Anderson, the Chief Executive Officer, joined the foundation in September 2018 after 8 years in Parliament as Chief of Staff to Rory Stewart. You couldn't make some of this stuff up, Mike.
No.
It's incredible. And if we go back to the Joe Cox Trustees, I picked up on one more man. That was Steve Morris, managing partner of Portland Communications. And if you go to his Twitter page, you can see him tweeting out this initiative, but he doesn't actually mention that he's obviously had a hand in creating it. So I did respond and say, Steve, you haven't told people you're part of this little initiative. But if you look at his tweets, I have to say, in my opinion, a lot of very pro-EU stuff and emotive ones like this. So the day the wall came down, we all became friends. I'm not sure I agree with that, but I would say this is pro-EU effectively. And then let's remind ourselves, we've had Nigel Farage talking about aggressive intimidation of candidates, but we're not hearing anything from the Committee for Standards in Public Life. This is how they've reported the subject of illegal behaviour, by casually saying what the parties say should happen, but nothing is happening on this. And we showed a couple of days ago this piece of legislation, the Representation of the People's Act 1983, which clearly says you're guilty of a crime if you attempt to influence candidates. And today a gentleman kindly sent me something else, that he thought that if you were offering honours, which is what Farage intimated was happening to his candidates, that was a crime in relation to the Honours Act 1925. So we've gone full circle there, but it's just fascinating to see that we've now got a charity working with the Committee for Standards on Public Life in order to say how the party should behave.
Yes. Now, getting back to to Nigel Farage on BBC last night, I just wanted to end with this because, of course, while he was pushing for constitutional change and pushing for the destruction of our system of governance in this country, what he really wasn't talking about was defence, the military, and our future relationship with the EU with respect to defence and the military. Now, he did say this: I don't want to be part of a European foreign policy. I don't want to be part of an EU army. I think we should be independent and make our own decisions. Well, that's fair enough as far as it goes. But as we're about to see after the ad break here, it really doesn't cover anything. Now, a number of people, including David Ellis, were in communication with Nigel Farage in recent days, gave him once again all the information he needed in order to make the situation or the issue of EU Defence Union and Britain's involvement in it an issue for this election. And he has chosen once again not to do that. And that fits the pattern of what this man is.
Which is not telling the public the truth about the real dangers they face in relation to EU Defence Union and how the fact that even if Brexit is declared, we will still be locked into this system.
Yes.
So he knows, but he doesn't want to talk about it. Therefore, you draw the conclusion that he's actually assisting the other side.
Absolutely, because that issue would become an issue which could allow them to win seats if they actually chose to campaign on it, but they're choosing not to at the moment. Now, if you like what the UK column does and you would like to support it, your support would be much appreciated and much needed. Please head over to ukcolumn.org/community and there are various options for how to join us there. A quick reminder that tonight is the UK column meeting in the George in Plympton, 7:30 as usual, and hope to see as many people there as possible. Okay, so today Dominic Raab is in Brussels for the NATO foreign ministers meeting. This is preparation for next month's NATO leaders meeting, which is taking place in London. Foreign ministers are going to agree, apparently, further measures to strengthen deterrence and defence, including hybrid threats, enhance NATO's role in the ongoing fight against international terrorism, and they're going to recognise space as an operational domain alongside air, land, sea and cyber. They've been hinting at this before, but they're going to do more of that. They're going to discuss other issues, including NATO's, what they describe as NATO's dual-track approach to Russia, the implications of the rise of China, energy security, and the future of arms control. And they're also going to discuss progress towards achieving further burden sharing, is how it's being described. And of course, burden sharing means EU Defence Union. That's how the EU is dealing with its burden sharing. So what did Dominic Raab have to say since he's at this today? We look forward to the UK hosting the NATO leaders in December and celebrating NATO's 70th anniversary and discuss how to further take the alliance apart, because that's really what this is about. He said strengthen the alliance, but he doesn't really mean it. But anyway, he is also, by the way, this was jumped off the page at me, using today's visit, this NATO visit, to separately meet with the E3. Now, what is the E3? Well, if you remember, we mentioned this last week, because here's the current German Defence Minister, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, who said, Brexit or not, the island, that's Britain, won't just sail away. It remains part of our security architecture. I therefore propose we make permanent the E3 format that emerged around the Iran question. So the E3 is Britain, France and Germany. It was there to deal with the Iran nuclear situation. But what's really interesting is that today Dominic Raab is going to be meeting with his E3 French and German counterparts, and they are going to discuss Iran, but they're also going to discuss the escalation of protests in Hong Kong. So in other words, the E3, which was there to deal with one single issue, is now dealing with much broader issues, and I think that what we're seeing is the consolidation of the E3 format, as Annegret has suggested, and we're going to see that become a much more permanent structure than it has been in the past. Why is that important? Well, we come back once again to the European Defence Union, and of course the pillar on the left is these bilateral, multilateral cooperation agreements NATO, of course, the pillar on the right, but with the pillar on the left comes the E3 and also EI2. And just to remind everybody what EI2 is, that's the European Intervention Initiative. This is a French-led initiative set out by Macron in September 2017. This was part of his vision for a sovereign, united and democratic Europe. And in order to achieve that ambition, they say, he put forward proposals for a common European intervention force and a common doctrine for action, independent of the European Union. 10 European countries, including the UK, are involved, and Italy had indicated its willingness to join in September 2019. I haven't checked to see whether they've done that yet, but nonetheless, this is one of the multilateral agreements which forms the left-hand pillar of defence union. It's not part of the European Union, but it creates the structures which will be rolled in to EU defence union in the future. So the question is, why did Nigel not mention any of that last night on Question Time? Well, apparently it's not important enough. So in the meantime, alongside the NATO foreign ministers meeting, NATO has pushed out their strongest anti-Russian rhetoric to date. They're saying that the Black Sea is a crossroads between Europe and Asia, an important waterway for trade and commerce. Security is vital to the countries that border it. And they produced a nice little map telling us all about it here. So we've got Bulgaria, Romania, Turkey, who are NATO partners. Ukraine, of course, and Georgia are the wider part of the wider Euro-Atlantic community. Well, they're saying that ever since Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea and its subsequent military build-up in the Black Sea, the security situation has deteriorated. Well, really, has it? I mean, Sebastopol has been the home to the Black Sea Fleet, Russia's Black Sea Fleet, since when? 1783. So please explain to me how this is an escalation that's going on there at the moment. They went on to say that at the Warsaw Summit in 2016, NATO allies announced an increased presence in the region, and they said that the Black Sea currently is faced with some significant strategic challenges. It's crucial that NATO shows its presence in this area of the world, to show solidarity with our allies and the other nations who are faced with these challenges on a day-to-day basis. NATO is going to be there NATO is going to be there and come and help if need arises. So they're going to be there, they're going to step in, they're going to deal with any challenge that Russia provides. Really, the rhetoric is escalating. And so I'm going to be watching this leaders meeting in December with great interest.
We've had some interesting comments in the chat box while you were talking through that section, Mike. So it was pointed out that in the Ukraine and Georgia, there's billboards effectively posted saying, come in NATO, we need NATO for the support there. But another comment which I thought was interesting is somebody pointing out that in Czechoslovakia and Romania, people on the streets are actually warning that many of the people who hold the positions of power are the same people who were holding their power under the communist system. So who are these people? We know that in the background we've got the BBC working with teams and their charity, BBC Media Action, to get in amongst this environment, supposedly to put the upstanding view of how to do business into those what do we call them, EU emerging states. So it's pretty volatile situation.
Yes. Okay, now let's come back to the UK, and well, everybody will be glad to know that the latest thing that the government is up to is all about improving crowd resilience. So what does this mean? Well, this is really all about surveillance. What they're saying is that following the 2017 terror attacks in Manchester and London, the Defence and Security Accelerator and the Home Office initiated a £2 million improving crowd resilience competition to seek innovative ideas to reduce the threat from terrorist and malicious use of explosives and weapons in public spaces. Right, so they by putting a bunch of face recognition and cameras in place, as you can see on the graphic there, they can automatically detect unattended packages and make sure that those don't explode.
Right.
So I'm feeling safer already. Well, they are going to ensure that public sector operators are provided with the opportunity to hear more from the successful winners of this £2 million grant. So they will be hosting an event on Tuesday the 3rd of December at the International Security Expo to show off their plans, but their plans basically involve surveillance.
We are seeing a dictatorship come in so fast now, Mike. It's just astonishing. So we've got all of this destabilization in politics, all the attacks on the Constitution, the attacks on the royal family now coming in. We've got chaos in this country, but if you analyse what is coming in with it, it's an increasingly oppressive system that's monitoring us, accusing us of being terrorists if we dare to challenge the government. So it's almost like the communist system is building in the West at the moment, but it's hidden under a thin veneer of corporatism. Perhaps it's better described as communitarianism.
Indeed. Right. Now we're going to end with a little video clip. Now this is Mick Wallace, the MEP for Ireland South, and he was challenging Federica Mogherini. Now Federica Mogherini, as the equivalent of the foreign minister for the EU, has only a few more days in post. What's that, about 11 more days? But nonetheless, she is still in post. And he challenged her yesterday or the day before on the issue of Bolivia and the EU's position on Bolivia and the EU's criticism of the election results there. So we're just going to play out this little video clip because it is fascinating, and what's particularly fascinating is the look that she gives to him as he finishes what he had to say. So now, before we go, we should mention that we're not here on Friday.
No, we're not here on Friday. Friday is Carol Bragg's funeral. I'd just like to say a big thank you to everybody who's sent in cards. We received this one this morning from Joan and Derek. So Joan and Derek, thank you very much. We did receive that card. So we have received cards, which is very kind. But Carol wanted a quiet funeral, very restricted numbers. She didn't want flowers. It was very typical of her that really she wanted things to be very quiet and discreet. So we will not be here on Friday because of the funeral, but thank you for those people who've sent in cards.
Absolutely. So we'll end with Mick Wallace here, and we'll see you at 1 p.m. as usual on Monday.
Madam Mogherini, you say that the OAS say there was severe irregularities in the 20th October election. Why didn't they give us the evidence of it? You also said that Morales won by 0.5%. No, he won by 10.5%. He needed the 0.5 to get over the 10% mark. He is clearly the most favoured candidate in Bolivia at the moment. Your analysis of how the election went, how the quick vote was stopped, there was a very good explanation for it. If with over 80%, it's normal to announce it then. The official vote started, and rather than having two votes run at the one time, they decided to run with the official one and only restarted the other one under pressure. Your arguments don't hold water, madam. Listen, the two boys who called for the removal, the head of police, General Kaliman, and the police commissioner, Calderon Mariscal, it's interesting that both of them served as attachés in Washington. The US had not got clean hands here. And it's beggars belief, madam, that you will not call this what it is. This was a military coup. This was a military coup. A good day for neoliberalism, but a bad day for the people of Bolivia.